You should get a notification. Bam, boom, bam. Thank you, ma'am. We're up live, Simity Sam. Okay. There's the echo. That was my echo, 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 echo. Hey, Bear, how's it going?
Good, good. Are we on?
We're on.
Okay. Right
Like
on.
Donkey Kong. I'm gonna hit record, I guess. It's just you and I today. It's like you say it's like old home week. Is that what you say?
Who's our guest today?
Our guest today is Dr. Bear Paul Lando and
Oh,
our
crap.
audience.
I should have thought of something to say.
Um, yeah, our guest today is you, folks.
Ooh, pressure's on.
We'll do a little Q&A as well. So if you guys have before I hit record here, I'll let you guys know. If you have any questions, we're going to go back into medical alchemy today and why people have symptoms and get ill and all that good stuff that Bear knows so well. And I'll just be here along for the ride, asking questions. And if you guys have anything specifically geared towards Bear or myself, put it in all caps in the chat. I'll be checking Rumble. Let me make sure
We
Rumble
also
has.
want your wisdom in the conversation. You were very knowledgeable. You've been in this game for a long time, so we'll have a good chat.
Yeah. Well, I've been in it for a minute, and I've used myself as a 6'3" testing rodent, and have learned a lot. So, okay, here we go. Uh, I'm gonna hit record and fire this bad boy up. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with the doctor that has taught me so much in my life, Dr. Bear Paul Lando, dear friend and mentor. We are going to be doing a fun in-house chat today as we dive back into what he knows so well, medical alchemy. And very excited about this because there's still so much confusion out there, Bear, about what really makes you ill and what's the remedy for that. And especially with a lot of the nonsense going on with, let's just say, the new administration and AI, incorporating AI into injections and all this stuff. It's just, it never ends. The clown show never ends.
Yeah, what could go wrong there?
But yeah, I'm excited to jump into this. I will be heading off to Mexico shortly. Excited to see some of you folks out there. Already, some of you are already there sitting on a beach. So, really looking forward to engaging with you guys. And in fact, Bear, I will be doing a workshop sort of based on a lot of this stuff, really just from my experience there. On Tuesday, about how I've just learned from you and what I do in my life to never go to the hospital. So it's really just like simple maintenance stuff and engaging with the elements and understanding from a terrain perspective how to stay healthy and not live in fear of disease. Yeah.
And while you're down there, be sure to have a few cricket tacos. They've been eating the bugs for a while.
Yes, they like a worm here and there in their tequila as well. So they know what's up. They've got great cuisine down there, and I'm looking forward to that, as well as DJ. And the thing I'm most looking forward to, Bear, is I'll be rocking the final party, the closing party, DJing with my boy Carrillo B, who's quite a talented DJ. So that's actually what I'm most excited about. So,
So you'll
uh,
be pole dancing too?
well, Kelly's not going to be there to inspire me. So, um, and there will be no donkey shows this go around. So, no, we're doing Mexico right. But it will be in a sweet spot on the beach, I believe, and it will be a good celebration for the week of immersion and freedom loving folks coming together. So that'll be great, and you'll be holding down the fort, slaving away while I go have fun. So. No,
Oh
it's
no.
actually a lot of work to get
I
down there,
know.
as you
Whenever you leave, we rage here.
know. Nice, nice. Well, we've got a little rain today, which is we were saying before we went live, it's actually been pleasant to get some rain here as we're used to because it's been so darn cold of late. Lots of freezes. So we're back to sort of our normal winter weather. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm not enjoying the freezing. I'm worried a little bit about the plant life out there on the farm. Kind of oh, I was going to say something. I forgot we're on air. I was going to use more of a vernacular that I would say around you, Michael. So, okay, let's get this thing going.
Okay, guys. And if you're new to the cast, you're new to us, you can check out us at alfavedic.com, alfavedic.com. As we go through today's, Bear's going to recap a bit of a presentation, and then we're going to open it up for a discussion and Q&A. A lot of what we offer on our website is, well, everything is based around this mindset, this technology, and this knowledge and wisdom. So go check us out at alfavedic.com. Tons of solutions there, and it's actually how we fund ourselves. Okay, well, the Alfacast journey began as a health and wellness podcast, and on this special in-house episode, we return to our roots. We've entertained many brilliant minds along the way and been privileged to hear the firsthand experiences from remarkable individuals in their quest to make a true difference in the world, regardless of personal cost. A recurring topic has been central to the question, what really makes us sick? Speak of the devil, too. Well, of the angel, rather. I'm sorry. We have Don Lester in the chat. Shout out to Don, who, of course, is one of the authors of the seminal book, What Really Makes Us Ill, with David Parker. Shout out to you, Don. Great to see you in the chat. Dr. Lando, that guy, and myself, we're inviting you to join this live stream chat, and definitely drop your questions in. If you do have a question, put them in all caps so I can see them. We'll start it off with this, with a provocative conversation on where we need to go beyond the conventional health versus disease dichotomy. And Barre will draw from his many years of clinical practice. Unfortunately, practitioner curriculums, including chiropractic, naturopathy, and acupuncture, have been standardized and confined to an acceptable scope of practice, a gross deviation from their eclectic origins. In centuries past, medicine was an alchemical art, and we're now equipped to see through the veil of secrecy that guarded these ancient practices and go well beyond. As we often say, Bear, this is about a progression, right? A progression of consciousness and technology and moving forward. So we respect and we very much honor the past traditions, but we're also always looking to innovate and take what the great masters before us did and move forward with those traditions.
Exactly. And, I think of it as more of a full circle journey
Mm.
because a lot of the things that we look back on, it's like childhood. You're in a great place in childhood. You're in the moment. You're in all those fantastic, you have all those fantastic attributes that you try to regain as an adult. But, as a child, you have to kind of lose your innocence and then hopefully refind it again, only this time with wisdom and experience behind you. And in that way, you appreciate things even more than you were able to as a child. So that's the journey we're taking with everything, I believe, including medicine, especially medicine. And what I'd really like to do is help us all lose the mystical connotations behind the word alchemy, because alchemy is a complete science. And if we really get in the headspace of the authentic alchemists of old, we'll understand that they'd be right here at home today, only able to avail themselves to certain technologies and improvements and even contributions that the conventional scientism world has added. It's not all bad. It's just that it's a one-way street there. So, I used to teach in college, actually. I was after graduate school, I was a TA, and then I inherited my own divisions of students. I had a couple classes, 200 people each, and it was a mandatory class if you wanted to graduate in psychology, of all things, and or if you were a psychology graduate student. And so I do my more traditional presentations. And I was thinking of that today, and then I thought, well, um, my old students, were there by no choice. They had to be there. You guys are here of your own volition, so I don't want to bore you guys to death. So I thought, let's just have a conversation.
I have a feeling a lot of the
Uh,
students wanted to be there. You probably were a pretty cool professor.
I was unusual because I finished graduate school my last year of football,
Yeah.
and I looked a little different, let's just say, than your average person, but because I did well in academics, and not that I wanted to be a psychology graduate student. In actuality, I wanted to stay and ski in the Utah school where I was at a while longer. And so that gave me 2 more years of season passes if I, taught there. So, and then I, left back and went the medical route. So anyway, here we are. And, it was good experience. So the skiing was anyway.
Yeah.
And so, what I'd like to do is bore everyone just a hair with an old presentation that we did. It was called Medical Alchemy. And Mike, you can put that up on the screen. And I just want to revisit a couple concepts, and then we'll quickly get out of there. And what I'd appreciate is if everybody could just get general concepts. And so it'll allow us a little higher altitude perspective on things. And when we talk about alchemy and when we get into these old alchemical terms, what we're going to do is quickly bring it to a practical level, because in my practice, if it didn't grow corn, as they say, it was useless to me. So I'm really not one to engage in esoterica for the sake of it. I just want to know, what works. And it turns out that those guys back then had a lot of good ideas. So today is sort of a synthesis of the old alchemical school of thought, and with a little bit of Steiner thrown in, and then also within a bioterrain context, because that was my specialty in my clinical years. So Mike, if you could perhaps just go, I'm going to just skip through these. We'll do maybe about 3 or 4. No, let's not do that. Go to the next one. And each of these topics, by the way, that we're going to highlight just in the preface right now are things that we are planning on blowing up and doing complete presentations. So it's really a lot of information, and it's a lot of things to wrap your mind around. And not that it's difficult to the intellect, but there's just a lot of information. It's also changing our minds about the way the universe works, and also how we are a microcosm of that universe. And when we understand the larger mechanisms, then we're also better equipped to practice medicine. Okay, what am I? Okay, so where are we here? Yeah, let's just go over this. So the cult of materialistic determinism. So if you let's just do the dichotomy between alchemy and scientism as we think of it today. So the old alchemists, or the old scientists, we should say, were about observing cyclic patterning, and
Sorry about that.
that's okay.
I was trying
So
to find, make sure I'm not muted. Oh, there we go. Okay, you're good.
okay, so in alchemy, the cause is about understanding. It's about directed consciousness, which means our own consciousness. It creates an electrical event. And from there, the alchemists understood the mechanisms of the ethers that actually precipitated matter and experience, including our own biology. And they also understood there was a continuity. In other words, there's a holographic repetition through the etheric medium. So when you study anything outside, when you study your body, with the practices we do in our lab, it's all replicating the same design. It might seem complex at first, but actually, the more you understand the grand design, you realize there's only one design that you have to understand and therefore master, because we are here to master this design. That's why we're in biological spacesuits in the first place. Now, when it goes to the mechanism is transmutation. In other words, the alchemists understood that there's no such thing as something fixed in matter or crystallized in any way. Everything from the elements in the ground to the cells in our body, the microbes that colonize and do all the work inside our body, the bugs in the ground outside, everything is in a constant state of transmutation. And when you understand that there's no such thing as being in a fixed state, that is the first myth to break, then you can start getting to the next part of the journey, is learning how to transmute matter yourself. And the purpose, of course, is self-determination, where we are no longer dependent on anything or feeling limited by anything or afraid of anything. And let's go to scientism just to contrast. Scientism is really about conjectured rationales. It's, thinking up of things to justify what we believe as far as the mechanisms behind life. And cause in the world of scientism is just random accidentalism. Just shit happens. We don't know why,
Chaos.
but it does. And
Pure
there's,
chaos, right? Everything's
yeah.
just chaos.
And, as far as looking at the continuity of things, we just now take apart things piece by piece and create theoretical constructs. And if you've been in the game long enough, I've been around a few years now, I've seen those theoretical constructs that were once gospel and blasphemous to question them, but now everybody's changed their mind because the logical fallacies become apparent over time. And then you create new theoretical constructs, and we see it happening to this day. And then the mechanism, of course, behind life, what the scientism people would say, excuse me, had something caught in my throat. And the mechanism is materialism through isolated processes. So you have all these little magic BBs we call atoms, and then from there, it's just all this partitioning of life, and then we need a different theory for every part of life. And from the top down, the purpose is really about social engineering. Now, there's a lot of great people in think tanks and people I went to school with. It's not like everybody's into lying to us, and again, there's some good things coming from that side. But at the very, very top, there's no other way to describe this whole method of thinking, and what has become the new religion, science, is really black magic. And it was intended to be black magic because the people that initiated all this, you go back to the Royal Societies and all that, they understood very well these mechanisms. They all had their personal alchemists, tending to their bodies and so forth. And but they want to keep the good stuff to themselves, but mostly be able to control other people. So let's go to the next one here, and we'll go through these quicker.
Yeah, no, I love this page. This breakdown is fantastic. It's a really great snapshot of sort of the reality versus the inversion and what we're dealing with today. And yeah, like in an ironic way, alchemy is the true science, right? People in that aren't familiar with this see it as sort of woo-woo or mystical, where scientism, which is the religion of our day, is really mystical because it's amazing how much they've inverted everything. Okay, next one.
Okay, I want to get to one slide that'll kind of set us off where I really want to go. Okay, let's just go through this real quick and hang with me. So in the old alchemical jargon, we had metaphors to relate to the different levels of the etheric mechanism. And again, they understood the etheric mechanism as a real mechanical process that starts with consciousness, and that would be the fire element. And that would, then step down to the air element, and then the water, the transmitting utility, and then finally to the ground in on the earth where we see things happening. And if you look at the ethers, you could also correlate that, each of those levels. You can see it there on the screen. Fire is like hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon. And when you understand that from more of a Western perspective, you can also understand where the fire element, the function of it is electricity. And that's where everything starts, again, with our own consciousness. And the air, when you understand what nitrogen does in the atmosphere, it creates a coagulation. And we could give you examples of that. I'm going to skip by it. We've done it in the past. So it's a real chemical process. And then the water, there's actually a fermentation that happens when things step down to the next level. And through that fermentation, there's a distillation, just like in my laboratory. If I want to take apart a plant into the three alchemical components, fermentation is a big part, because then that starts the separation process that precedes the purification, and then the final put it all back together coabation process. And that fermentation now in the natural order then allows all of those informational fields, now that nature through the water element has picked things apart and deciphered things, those informational fields can then be grounded in through the elements on the ground. And we're talking about the periodic table of elements, because those are the capacitors that receive information. And then that information is conveyed to us through the soil, through our food, through our cells, and so forth. And so these four functions, or these four levels, the alchemists would decipher them as sulfur, mercury, and salt. Now, sulfur is like your individual soul. And if you can imagine that our soul, as it re-embodies, it's a repository of all of our experience, all the data, everything that we have picked up along the way, that then becomes the ego, the self. And, in Rudolf Steiner's way of looking at things, that self then, is called the I, but then there comes a point where that I transcends and becomes master of the universe, we'll say. And then the mercury is that substance that, if you look at these four levels, the sulfur is a combination, we won't get into the details, but combination of two of the ether levels, the mercury, two others, the salt is, more the fixed elements we call the water and the earth, where the rubber meets the road. So the mercury, they called it prana, they called it chi, and so forth. The salt is actually, the precipitation, crystallization of those informational fields. Now, the next slide, we're going to see how that translates all the way through a continuum into the things that somebody in medicine might want to think about. Can you go to the next one there, Mike?
You see it?
Good. Okay, so we're still looking at the three levels. And, now you can look at how this translates into the three tissue types that embryologically unfold when our human body is once again making an entrance. And the three tissue levels are endoderm, mesoderm, ectoderm. Ectoderm makes the neurological stuff, the endoderm, mesoderm, other things, we won't go into all of them. That also translates each of those three into different organisms that are symbionts that are associated with each of these germ levels. So now all of a sudden, we're into an area of understanding microbiology in a much different level. Rather than thinking of germ pathogens, we're understanding that there are actually phases of microbiology that are the ecobionts, or the little partners suited for each of the three germ levels. This is very important when you're practicing medicine. And then that translates those same three principles, uh, sulfur, mercury, and salt, into the actual elements. And you can see a couple elements there, salt and iron and calcium and magnesium and potassium and so forth. They're all associated for a very logical reason. You'd understand, when we can break this apart, maybe more in the future, how these are all holographic representations of the same thing that starts in the sky above us and on a grand scale, all the way down into our bodies, all the way into the microbiology, and all the way down into the chemical elements. So I just wanted to just brush over these things to get the big idea across of as above, so below. But rather than just saying that because it sounds kind of cool and trendy, it really is that way. And we can trace each of the as above, so below, the three that, we keep coming up with is this trio that exists through all things. It's, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the three attributes of existence, part of the seven attributes that are passed down through higher intelligences, that then, astrologers also talk about the seven sacred planets, the seven colors, the seven octaves. It all fits in. But the first three of those are exactly, the will force. Why don't you go to the next one, and we might even have it over there. Let's see, do we want to talk about? Now go to the next one.
Wait, did I go here?
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so we just repeated so you can see, the four layers that coincide with the metaphoric elements of the alchemist. But instead of saying fire element, we're going to look at now the etheric mechanism that makes our biology, and that begins with our consciousness and our soul level. So that would be the mental, astral, vital, and physical. I hope everybody can follow on this chart online there. So the mental is where things are initiated, that hydrogen element, where it's that first spark, from consciousness when you have an idea, an electrical event. And now that needs to go down to the next level, which has to do with emotion. Emotion is really what we always say gives the velocity to our ideas so that they can then pop. It's remember, the nitrogen is at that level that coagulates those informational fields from those ideas, and then those in turn imprint on the vital or the etheric body, which is the first one outside the physical body as we think of it, and those informational fields then become the physical form. And what's neat is in this day, we have computer technologies and things. So a lot of these ideas aren't that far-fetched, where we deal in the world of informational fields and how those informational fields can actually create things. So then those four are distilled down into the three again, the soul, the spirit, and the body. Now we're getting a little bit closer to how this might translate into the practice of bioterrain medicine. So on the soul, and a lot of this is really also confirmed by Rudolf Steiner, the soul, if you want to look at the three areas of the body, really relates to the torso. And, so the torso, of course, contains all of the vital organs of the body. The spirit, which is that animating force that moves through all things, the prana, the chi, and so forth. That is how we create movement. And the extremities, of course, are how we exercise our will force, the number one ray, and that is allows us to ambulate through space and have this experience at the directive of our will. The body then is about the cranium. The cranium is more that salt element that the alchemist spoke of, and the cranium being hard structure, encases the most vital, well, the second most vital organ, the brain, where that spark is then conveyed down into the fluids of the brain through the cerebral spinal fluid. And a lot goes on there. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit more. Now, if you look at the torso, that has to do with metabolism. Metabolism is the body, is kind of the yin force. It's how the body makes energy through all the organs and the different biochemical processes, as we like to think of them, how energy is created. And then the cranium is all about the neurology. So if we can just look at kind of a pendulum where you have metabolism on one side and neurology on the other, that's the main thing we want to get into today, and that's how we'll understand more about perhaps how we can go beyond treating sickness and actually understanding where issues are emanating from and what things we need to balance. Why don't you go to the next slide, just see what's there for the heck of it. Okay, just a few quick words. Now, in the alchemical process, we've mentioned this quickly. There's three processes. First, like if I go in my lab again and I'm working with a plant or mineral that I want to make into a medicine, I want to separate the components. I'm going to separate the components into what we've been talking about, into the sulfur, the mercury, and the salt. And then I've outlined a little bit here. It's too much to get into right now. But then after we create that separation, we have ways of purifying. Now, in the practice of medicine, there's a purification process that needs to be done on many different levels. We'll talk about each of those levels. And then at the end, as in my clinical practice, when the process is well underway, then people start becoming whole again. It's putting back. So it's really an alchemical process, follows the identical procedures that the alchemists developed in the lab, and also considered the highest spiritual practice because they came to know through their experience that when they did these experiments, it had a great effect on their own evolution, we'll say that. And so that's why it's considered a spiritual art. And if you go back to the days of Hippocrates, he also admonished that a physician was a very noble endeavor, and one where the physician was to teach, not to heal so much, but to bring this awareness of everything we're talking about so that people could make themselves whole again, because, nobody can do it for you. I think that's good for the slides, Mike.
Okay.
And the slides go on and on there, and we'll have presentations on each one of them because there's a lot of information there. In fact, I think when we did a podcast on this a long time ago, we didn't even get halfway through it.
We kind of powered through the end. We need to break down each one of these slides into a detailed Alfacast, and then I will make sure that this presentation is available on our site. So if you guys are on the platform, I will put that up there so you guys can reference that, because it's chock full of really powerful information. And yeah, I look forward to studying that more myself, Barre, and especially like you were saying, the functionality side, right? Like once we distill all of this divine wisdom, how do we put it in action?
Exactly. So let's go into
can I
Go
say
ahead.
one thing too about that? I was just
Please.
thinking of Walter Russell because of sort of the two-way motion of the universe, and you have the continual fractal life and death cycle going on, and that's sort of right, the metabolism versus the neurological, and in the middle, the movement and the functionality of the body moving. That's the fulcrum. That's, in a weird way, it's like the fulcrum, right, between the up and down of life death, because as we've talked about in previous alpha casts, you have the neurology burning out to death and you have the metabolism creating life.
Right. So if you look at the brain, what it's doing is receiving the resonance, the information, it's come down through the ethers, finally through the water medium. And that information then goes through our neurology into the metabolism in order to animate the metabolism, in order to provide life and energy for our body. And in the process, there's a manufacture of neurotransmitters and a lot of events. And like you just said, those events are a one-way street because once they're spent, they're spent. So it is what could be considered what Goethe and Steiner described as a death experience. However, those signals then gave life to the metabolism, and which is more that yin element. Then the metabolism in turn uh, creates the life, and we're going to explain the interface on how that life creates experience and then translates back into where things are really happening. So any questions before we just move on there, or how the
No,
folks in the chat
yeah,
doing?
it's cool how fire sort of relates to that top too, and how the fire is sort of part of the neurology, right? It's like that's how I envision it, sort of burning. It's like the fuel is burning the transactions there, sort of, it's electrical, of course, the way the neurology works, and then you've got the metabolism that's sort of, also the other side of fire in terms of the creation cycle. So yeah, it's just interesting how we've had fires, in the news and stuff, and how they've weaponized it in many ways, but how beautiful and how important it is as an element in terms of literally divine creation. It's just when you get into this stuff, into alchemy, it's so beautiful and how it presents itself. And when you have the true knowledge, then that, like you said, that fear goes away of these things. And what we're talking about in the end, right, is, and I love that you end on this, on the purpose. Like the purpose is our life's purpose, our self mastery, our self direction. And when we get to that, then it sort of feeds back in a loop that maintains health. Because when you have a purpose and your life's mission, then that provides the drive and the momentum to then make sure that the top-down mental process, the emotions, the will force is moving in the correct way as to not create disease. So it is a loop. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you're doing it right.
Exactly. And I've always been a fan of Walter Russell because he explained it well for the Western mind in terms of waveform mechanics. And he understood how the consciousness and that first electrical spark is the beginning of a waveform. And then that waveform actually, you have to get into geometry a little bit. There's, the cube and the sphere as he talks about it. But as that sphere is created by the original turbulence of the electrical properties, created by idea, then that bounces off the inside of the cube, which is 6 sides. So that creates the shape of the waveform. And then when we further interject our consciousness in a 3D affair like XYZ axis, that's the final 3. That's the 3 times 3 that Tesla was always trying to teach us about. So it's the power of the 3 times 3. Again, just like the alchemist, he came up with the 3, but now a little bit more towards practicality because Walter also understood how there's no such thing as static matter and that the elements themselves were actually in a constant movement between octaves and one becoming the next and so forth until they completed the journey and came back to the start. Okay, so let's talk about the body here, because I know that's what we're all here to talk about. If we look at the metabolism and the neurology as 2 dipoles, now the arteries carry it's the lifeblood to the metabolism, the oxygen and energetic components, the ATP, all the stuff that is going to create metabolism. So you have the arteries carrying life in order to animate the metabolism. And then the metabolism, when it's done with all of its processes, it returns back through the veins and the lymphatics. Now, when it does that, all of those metabolic processes that were initiated through the arterial blood, as they return and become spent blood through the vessels, they're not just spent completely, because they carry all of the recordings of the either dissonance or health of everything that transpired from every single cell of the body, whether it's a cell that's a composite that makes up an organ, or whether it's the corpuscles of the blood themselves. And now that is a recording of where that soul is at on many levels in their evolution. Now, what happens is the lymphatics and the venous blood interfaces, and we'll keep it general first, and then we'll give you some more specific examples. It interfaces with the cerebral spinal fluid. Now, the cerebral spinal fluid then travels up and down the spine into the higher parts of the brain. And now that interfaces directly with the astral body. And anthroposophical medicine is really a lot about this and explains it in quite detail. So let's just get some ideas across first. Now the astral body is able to make sense out of it. That is our life experience, where we're at in our consciousness, where we're at on our journey. And now those recordings go to the astral body. Remember, the astral body is how we feel. And how we feel is what creates everything. You can have ideas all day long, but until the feeling comes into the equation to the astral, you don't have life. Now, the astral body, in turn, reconveys that information all the way back down through the neurology to the metabolic processes and around and around and around. So what we're suggesting is that our experience then recreates by way of the astral, its final destination, and is returned to us through the neurology, through the metabolism, to create our body in space and time exactly the way it was the last moment, unless we make some conscious changes. Medicine is about making those conscious changes, or bringing a client's, or let's just not isolate this to practitioners with clients. We'll say anybody that is in a self-care kind of mode. It's the same thing. When you make those conscious changes, let's just say we just start with physical purification. And maybe while we're at it, let's talk about the 6 stages of disease, because we'll keep it nuts and bolts and then go from there. The 6 stages of disease was a schematic that was developed by German doctors, Reckewig. And it also mirrored exactly what was found in Chinese medicine 5,000 years prior, which they had their own version of the 6 stages of disease. Ayurvedic medicine, using entirely different terminology, but talking about the same exact phenomena, had the 6 stages. So there's this kind of agreement through time and different groups of people that we go through these 6 stages from wellness to what we think of as disease. And what's nice about the German model is that, and I have this posted in our membership area for our members, if you look at the chart, you see that as you go down each of the 6 columns, they coincide with the accumulation of toxins. We're going to talk about physical toxins first, but then more important are the emotional and mental toxins that are really shaping our body in the first place. But you have to start somewhere. Now, let's just say somebody's chemtrailing us and you have some exposure and maybe some heavy metals, and it's not a good thing, but when your body's in pretty good order, what's going to happen is your body's going to have a reaction that's going to upchuck and get rid of it. And then, I'm not going to go through each of the 6 stages, but in succession, you go from more severe reactions to accumulations where maybe your body now can no longer keep up with the burden. And now the next phase, you have actually an impregnation, like a tattooing into the tissues of the body of these toxins, and they become, indelibly imprinted. And then that creates cellular changes. And if you look down the 6 columns, you'll see, according to each of the stages of accumulation, as they get more severe and become more permanent in our body, they divide them up into all the tissues of the body. So if somebody comes in and they say, okay, I've got Parkinson's, well, you can simply look on this and see that, well, you're in this stage, and at this stage, if you look at the neurological connection, or with that particular column, you're going to find that those are the exact outcomes that you would expect when you get to that stage with neurotoxins. So it's a very nice way to understand, and a great thing for practitioners and just regular folks alike to start understanding how they get there. It's not about, oh, I caught something or I have a disease. It's about the fact that, no, you have something going in a particular tissue of your body. And with that particular symptom, it means you are in that phase of one of the 6 phases of disease. And then the goal then is to reverse it and go backwards. This also brings in microbes as well. People are saying, okay, there's all sorts of pathogen-induced diseases, as we're taught. Not really, but here's what's really going on. When you go into any of these more advanced or chronic conditions, then microbes have to transmutate into different cycles where they have functions, where they are going to the bioterrain, to the area that's having a problem, and they might be called on to stimulate stem cell production for regeneration, to heal something, or they might become scavengers, in order to clean up. Like in your aquarium tank, you have the bottom feeders. They kind of have that sort of function. And and then if we do not support them, then they can become chronic in themselves and create problems, and then give germ theorists the aha, I knew it, it's caused by a germ. No, they're just there trying to do their job. Good management of the biotrain won't let you get that far or know how to reverse the situation. Okay, so we can talk a little bit later about how you begin to maybe purify the physical body. And there's many ways to do that. That's a good idea, because now let's just say you start to clean up some of that, and now the arterial blood is going to be cleaner. It's going to have less garbage that's going to be translated from the lymphatics and the venous supply to the cerebral spinal fluid. And the next moment, the astral body, which is remodeling your body every single moment based on the information it is getting by way of the cerebral spinal fluid, is going to be able to recreate your body on some level in a little bit more of a pure, more functional state.
Yep.
Now, where it really matters is getting rid of some of these old toxic emotions, because
Yep.
that's really what makes us tick. So go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to say, though, it's once again, it's that feedback loop, it's the pendulum. So sometimes, and I'm going to talk about this in Anarchapulco, while it is an inside out of, reality, and it's mind to emotions and feeling that drives desire, that creates the physicality. Sometimes if you're in a really bad state, because maybe you're just waking up to all of this and you're coming out of the materialistic allopathic model and your body is wrecked from poor diet, poor lifestyle, nutrition, etc., you got to work in the physical plane first to be able to even have the capability then to get out of pain, to get out of physical ailments, right? Then to be able to actually get in tune with your spiritual side, with the emotional resonance of mastery. So it's super important if you guys are suffering from, I've got questions coming to you, Bear, from the chat too.
Okay.
But if you're suffering from, specific physical ailments, poor health, there are lots of strategies on the physical side to first remedy that. So then you can get back to the mastery on the inside so that you don't have to deal with those so much anymore, right? That's sort of what you're getting at there.
Yeah, and also the more physical biotoxins that you have accumulated, you're literally you're drunk. You know, your liver starts producing certain things that are like a true intoxication.
Yep.
And that's why when you're on that vicious circle, it's like a drunk, you need a few shots in the morning just to feel right. And that's why people continue on with let's just say lifestyle habits that aren't that beneficial. And now when you're a little less intoxicated, you can think a little clearer, you feel a little better emotionally, a little more positive, and that starts the momentum going. That's why my journey began as I've talked about many times. I was a jock, and through that, I just became sort of fanatical about my training, and diet followed. And early on, it was about getting big and strong and all that sort of thing. On the other hand, that was step one into just understanding the quality of food, and also feeling better when you ate real food versus non-food.
Yeah.
And that began me reading books by some of the early naturopaths, Pavo Arola and Paul C. Bragg and all those kind of early pioneers. And next thing you know, we're taking the next step. But that's why a lot of people start their journey with their physical health. It's the obvious place to begin because that's where we're at.
You mentioned on one of the slides the importance of essentially, to encapsulate it, working with nature in conjunction with our divine intelligence, right? So you have the nature side, which is here working in really as in programs of really nature's perfection. And then we have our mind, intelligence, wisdom that comes from spirit, that's eternal, that is the creator side. And that is where the true power of everything lies. But that can really mess us up if we don't have the self mastery, where nature can always bring us back to balance because it's just functioning always in this perfect, program, if you will, from the creator. So yeah, like you were saying, going back to nature, natural, healthy foods and herbs, and all of those things. Those are here to, I believe, bring us back in balance when we get depolarized, if you will, or if we forget about the polarization, we forget about how we're supposed to be sort of riding that back and forth and trying to get in that stillness and that balance. Nature can always bring us back.
Exactly. And that's where meridian therapy comes in. Once we get a little bit down the road, maybe we start seeking self-help ways of stimulating our own meridians and bringing them into balance, or seeing a professional. Meridians, or what we might think of acupuncture, is really about syncing ourselves up, our internal organs, with the external environment, which isn't external at all, but as we think of it. And, one of the techniques I understood early on to prove out that point is in our clinic, I had people coming from a long ways off, and they're often in jet lag. And in order to get them out of jet lag, I would do a simple procedure to sync up their acupuncture meridian system with the meridian time clock, we'll say, of the new location where they just landed, and we're literally within 5 minutes they're out of jet lag.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can
So
also, I think the body can actually do that if you engage in nature in certain ways. Like I found that when I like traveled across to Australia, I went right into the ocean and just immersed myself in the water there. And I was just thinking maybe the water's like because the water carries information and
oh,
it's
absolutely.
memory. So it's like I'll let that the waters of this Australian ocean talk to my waters and sync me up. And then also you just it's like going into a baptism, right? It's just cleaning all the crud off from the flight, from the 20-hour flight or whatever. And yeah, it just totally felt rejuvenated
Oh
and
yeah,
synced up.
best method ever. The takeaway though is that most people, without knowing it, are walking around in jet lag.
Yeah.
And I know that because all the clients that I used to see, the first thing I do is a little test on what we call the now point, which is a specialized point in acupuncture. We call it alarm, and every meridian has an alarm point. And I would be able to see if their now point was in sync with the time and the location, they were in. And, most people are permanently jet lagged and feeling a little groggy, but it's the new normal, so they aren't even aware of it. So, back to our metabolism and neurology, the main takeaway is that what is shaping our body every single moment is the astral plane. It's how we feel. So that's
And
why,
can I say
go
one
ahead.
thing about that? Because this is the crux of scientism is that they don't recognize that that even exists. And I'm sure we may even have people who are coming in new to Alpha Vedic and, oh, you guys are talking about true science, and here you are talking about woo-woo astral. And this is a huge, I think, a huge issue is one, the foundational concepts of consciousness, which is what we're really talking about here, cannot be explained, described, or defined in by materialists within the scientism faith. They don't know how to define it. They don't know how to understand it because they are locked into pure materialism of within the realms of atomism and all these things that are limiting, that are not wholly scientific, actually. So it's tough because people are often in a mind trap of believing in pure materialism and then seeing this as woo-woo when really this is the real science. And actually, I'm thinking of maybe like the Monroe Institute. And there are individuals out there who have brought like the astral plane, astral projection, this stuff, these other layers of consciousness to science, right? Like I'm thinking of Robert Monroe, Barre, and the Monroe Institute, where they've
Mhm.
shown that to these more materialistic minds that this reality exists. Now, of course, we know this through understanding the true science of alchemy, but this is a crux, right? This is like a big hurdle for I think a lot of people to wrap their heads around, like that this stuff exists, the etheric plane, the astral plane, etc.
Yeah, and the way I roll, I don't go just for concepts or philosophies. In my clinical practice, I had to have measurable results and things that I could apply that changed a person's condition. And as far as the astral plane, the mental plane, the etheric plane, they can all be measured. We have instruments, calibrated instruments that measure them. They measure, tell us where there's distortions, where problems are emanating from, how that relates on the physical body, how it's creating maybe problems in the glandular system versus the musculoskeletal system, and so forth. So, it's these are real things. And I'd like to also add that the most advanced technology for discerning any of this is your hands. And one of my early teachers in the world of osteopathy, John Pierre Barral, he was very well known, and I learned the whole system of visceral manipulation with him. And through that, if you stick through the advanced levels, you can detect not only where issues are in the body, but with your hands, you can tell if it's from the mental plane. You can actually age it and kind of tell approximate, how long this energetic disturbance has been there. You can tell if it's coming from more the emotional body, and you know the hands of the body are extremely important. And anybody that's in the healing arts should really take hands-on courses in old school osteopathy before they do anything. I've had a number of times where with friends of mine who are in the medical field who, for instance, believe the skull ossifies at a certain age and there's no movement in it. Well, if there's no movement, you'd be dead. And the reason why they believe that is just like I did in medical school. We cut apart cadavers and everything. You know, the all the joints of the skull, all the fissures were ossified because they're dead. The Italian anatomist, you know, had ways of testing this on live bodies and found that no, actually these joints move. But it's a very subtle movement, and you have to train your hands how to do it. So a few buddies that were in the medical field that didn't believe this, you know, but they stuck with it, and I went through just some basic training hands-on so they could at least feel the most fundamental flexion extension of the cranium that's happening all the time. And just an immense look of surprise when they could actually start to tune in, be still, and feel that. Now, when you feel that, while we're on craniopathy, that's immensely important because that is what supports cerebral spinal fluid movement. And in a practical sense, in the clinic, you can couple other therapies with that in order to bring back proper movement, because any distortion in that movement, which you can train yourself to feel and very surgically bring balance back, you know, through all the different articulations in the skull, you can couple that with other therapies that then are going to convey those messages directly through the cerebral spinal fluid, and then, you know, again to the astral body that will then remodel a more perfect body in the next moment.
Wow.
The way you can also find what, well, maybe we should mention New German medicine. Dr. Hammer, a brilliant physician from Germany who a lot of people are familiar with, coined the word or the term New German medicine. And what he proved through CAT scans and Western technologies and medical tests is that there is a connection between insults to the psyche that then trigger our neurology, that then in turn instigate a biological expression that we would call disease. And in New German medicine, if you bring that awareness to a person as far as the insult into the psyche, you know, maybe triggered at some point in their life, and how that created a biological expression, then it allows that biological expression to go full circle and go away, you know, even tumors and things like that. The only shortcoming, and this is no slam on Dr. Hammer's brilliance, because he was really a pioneer, but they didn't quite get into explaining how those insults get there in the first place. And towards the end of his life, he was kind of getting into some sound therapies and things. So he was, I think if he was alive, he'd be way ahead of the curve of everybody. Now, I've practiced New German medicine for many years, not as a sole practice, but just a technique that would, or an understanding that would give me more insight into people. But also I knew if people were more free of other emotional conflicts pre-existing that maybe didn't create a biological expression, then they would be, let's just say, more in a harmonious state where they wouldn't get triggered to have, you know, the event that created the big biological expression that, you know, created maybe something we consider a serious disease. Now, in my practice, I combined this understanding with the practice of ionization analysis, which is another brilliant individual, Carrie Reams, who created the ionization analysis technique, and is taking bodily fluids and taking those chemical assays and translating them through mathematics into ratios that would then tell you the electrical line of resistance in the body. The least resistance, the healthier you are. So I did that on every single person. But what I was also did is I kind of hybridized that and used more of mathematics in order to discern, we'll call them trauma sequences. And there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sconia who actually pioneered a lot of this. Now, he used infrared technologies and things in order to get readings. I combined mine with ionization analysis and did more mathematically. And but the bottom line is you find out that there are 128 possibilities, according to Sconia, that correlate with every tissue of the body, kind of double the number of 64 codons. And, you know, certain numbers keep coming up for good reason. Yin and yang are the same thing. And through conventional radiation studies, we find that certain tissues succumb quicker to radiation than others. We're talking about ionizing radiation. Lymphatics are very sensitive to it. Other tissues in the body withstand more. Now, when we have traumatic or emotional insults, we'll say, things of a certain intensity, it creates an electrical discharge. That becomes a pressure zone. And now that pressure can affect certain tissues and organs specifically. So the ionization technique with the Sconia technique, it would allow us to understand a trauma sequence. There could be anywhere to 6 to a dozen. And it would tell the precise time in a person's life when these insults occurred, what organs were affected, and how that radiation from that pressure was affecting that organ and causing physical problems. It was a laborious process, but I would take people through maybe an hour session on each one of these, and sometimes there'd be a dozen. So, you know, I'd have to do it over weeks, but we'd literally discharge the pressure from each of these components of the trauma sequence until they were clear. And you see physical problems go away. And we know because now those stresses on those physical tissues that are going to be carried, that information is going to keep recycling through those metabolic processes to create problems. And then the same informational fields conveyed to the cerebral spinal fluid back to the astral body that's then going to recreate the same problem in the body. So you have to dissipate that stuff. And I also found when I did a lot of those sorts of things, what we, would concern ourselves with a certain trauma as identified in New German medicine, most often that would go away too. The other thing with New German medicine is when you understand it's a biphasic process. In other words, there's microbes involved, there's, tissue changes and things that, we term as pathology. And in order for them, let's just say a person is successful in identifying the insults of the psyche and discharge that, in order for it to go full cycle, say for a growth to disappear, well, you need microbes in order, that associated with that germ layer, like we were talking about early on, like maybe the ectoderm, maybe there's something in a central nervous system, then you need certain kind of endobionts that are there. If they aren't there, then, you're going to be in a hanging conflict. If you don't have the proper informational fields that are carried by the capacitors that carry that information, like the cell salts, or if you have other impediments in the body where the elimination organs can't do their job properly because they're overburdened, any one of these number of things, well, you're going to get in a hanging conflict no matter how much awareness you bring into a person. So then you're back to managing the bioterrain, and through, and using the microscope and a lot of other ways of, introspecting where a person's at, then you can, really understand the microbial colonization, where there might be imbalances, and, where you need to intervene. And also through the ionization analysis, understanding how to work certain chemical constituents in order to bring the electrical line of resistance more into a more beneficial line, and so forth. Now, when the bioterrain is more functional, then then those biphasic biological expressions that doctors think are diseases and what Hammer knew otherwise, now you can get off that hanging conflict and get better. So I'm kind of rambling in a lot of different directions here. It's a little bit of rocket science, but these concepts, even for do-it-yourselfers, when you realize what makes you tick, which is in fact on the emotional level, and you take baby steps on the physical level, grow your awareness, and that will all pay great dividends, as far as getting off the wheel. So let me stop there. Do you want to ask any questions from yourself or anybody?
Yeah, plenty of questions here. So I what I'm gleaning from this once again is this interplay between the physical sort of genius behind our bio machine computer that we have here and the inner milieu, if you will, or the universe of microorganisms that live within us. Talk about as above, so below. You're talking about, these within the ionization, and you have these pressure systems and pressure zones that are created. I'm literally thinking of weather. Like it's like our internal
It's
weather
internal
system.
weather. No, it's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's wild. And so we are our own gods in that are when we are unconscious of that, of our I am, I'm literally like our I am presence, right? Then the universe within us can, if it's not fully taken care of correctly, it won't serve us correctly. And so then we are in a weakened state when we are assaulted by an outside force like a trauma or something, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, etc. So it's imperative to have that balance between the ecosystem within and then, of course, our how we navigate the world outside. But we live in a world that's full of conflict, right? On purpose, right? That's how we grow back to like our purpose. So how does one, here's the big $1 million question, because we know and we get hit up all the time. Where's a bioterrain physician that I can contact? Where I need help? Like, so how does one, because we live in a world now where that doesn't really exist and we're trying to change that and remedy that. And we have ideas on how we can start education platform to help people who are interested in learning this, learn this better. But really we're talking about know thyself, heal thyself, right? So how does one start to incorporate all this in their own lives, because it's really hard to find a professional that did what you did, so that we can maintain this homeostasis and true health.
Yeah, and I don't want to suggest that there's not good doctors out there.
Yeah,
It's just
course.
that there's a certain generation of doctors that I came up with. It's really not many around anymore. And especially our mentors back then, are not around. And, in the write up, I purposely talked a little bit about the schooling that doctors get these days. It's all standardized. If you talk to some of the pioneers of chiropractor and naturopathy, they were real deep thinkers and very eclectic in their approach, and
And
not so
holistic and more
anymore.
holistic minded, right? It
Mhm.
wasn't so narrow specialized.
Exactly, exactly. And I was fortunate, I came up at a certain time. So to answer your question, um, I think the name of the game is just awareness. And people, I believe, we now are in a wonderful time where we can actually embrace the fact that we have all the answers right above our head all the time. And maybe doctors are an obsolete concept.
Yeah.
Um, Now, in the world of medicine and the belief system that I adhere to and that I've practiced for a long time, because some of the original people in the movement, it's the Saint Germain, Foundation, were actually very involved in healing the physical body, but they all admonish people in the healing arts that after a certain time of hands-on work, you have to take your hands off because it will stymie your development. And the point is that you now have to jump directly to the source. And if you are supporting somebody, you do it from the unseen and not through a physical medium. Because through the healing arts, what practitioners are supposed to learn is that things are always happening on the unseen in the first place. It's not about, something we're eating out here. And so practice makes perfect. You have to, at that point, just go into really using your visualization abilities that are within the context of a real belief system through experience, not just hope, but actually a firm belief through experience. And then you see that your results are perhaps a lot better than even when you were doing hands-on doctoring. So the point I'm trying to make is I think that's where we all need to go, whether you chose a vocation in the healing arts or not. But in the meantime, we still have a lot of things that to avail ourselves with, as far as, different herbal products and things that, can really make the physical part of the journey expedited and, get to the point where we're talking about. It might be good right now to take more of a specific example of where the etheric meets the physical. The five senses are very special in that when you understand how they work, they're also a dipole. They both project and receive. We are more into a receptive mode. In other words, just taking in data through our five senses and believing that that's what's real and not understanding that the other part of our sensory apparatus is actually us projecting. That projecting part is in turn creating what we're receiving. So, we have to get more into how that works. Now, hearing is a very special sense because it's the only one of the five senses that doesn't have direct neurons interfacing with what we're perceiving. Instead, it's more internal, and it has to go through the outer ear canal. And the point of the outer ear canal is actually to screen out information, not to receive information. And it's screening out all the extraneous noise that we don't need, but picking up information that then's translated directly to the fluid-filled sac, in the internal ear. And then that interfaces directly through the choroid process with the brain and goes right to the cerebral spinal fluid. So what we're talking about here is hearing can be very instrumental in helping people evolve through the practice of sound therapy, because that direct translation that's unique to that particular sense goes right to the astral level. That's why the great composers like Beethoven, who were stone deaf, how the heck did they compose those things when they couldn't hear them? Well, they were operating on a different level. So sound can actually bring us to that level where we're consciously working internally on the astral and not just passively passing garbage to the astral that then recreates the next metabolic event that makes us sick.
I love that. Yeah, when I had gone to Tahoe a couple of weeks ago and stayed one night at my buddy Mick's, they have this sound healing table that he's been messing with. And so he has this basically you lay on this table and he has the resonance of specific tones and stuff going through a speakers under you. and it's
Hmm.
vibrating you. And then you put headphones on and have
Right.
specific, and it's all syncing. And I was like, what? And then they're doing all sorts of stuff with muscle testing and relating to that, and trying to get, and then bringing light. Their next phase is bringing light into it above you. So you'll have light therapy going above you. So you have the multi, stuff going on. But I was just like, oh man, I felt so good after that. And I agree. Like we've talked about in 100 podcasts, like if we truly had healing cities and stuff, and we actually had holistic minded, benevolent people in charge, we would be walking through sound chambers, through your city gardens and or parks and stuff that would heal you, right? As you just walk through like a
Yeah.
tunnel,
And
and then
and
yeah,
our constant bombardment through Wi-Fi and so forth is dissonance. That's sound therapy of the wrong kind. It's taking
yeah.
us in the wrong direction. And that is, those frequencies are perceived as sound. I was talking to you the other day about it. I've met some remarkable people. Daniel Brinkley was one of them, where I had dinner with him one night, and he had not a near death, but a death experience.
I think he
And
had
on,
three. I think he had three, Bear.
yeah, yeah. But on the other side, he had his experiences. We won't talk about that. You can read his books. And he described how we have a life review. Well, that life review that we will
There's a.
all,
I found this book at
okay.
a thrift store for 50 cents. And well worth the read for sure. Saved by
So
the
that
Light.
life, yeah, that's a great book, by the way. And it's also a movie with Julia Roberts' kid brother, of all people, Eric. So that life review is something we'll all experience to see how we did, but it's not um, your angel team sitting around you judging you for what you did that was good or bad. It's about what kind of music you made, because every single thought, feeling, and action that we choose to have in an embodiment creates a real resonance that is either dissonant or harmonious. And so what our life review is about is how much dissonance versus harmony that we created. And so, I just really want to impress this astral component is not only is the key to becoming healthy and well, but it goes much deeper than that also. And I've shared with our audience before, in our clinic, our sound room was a very important component. And what I did is I had Sherry Edwards, remember, come out. Those of you that are familiar with Sherry Edwards, I was already doing some advanced sound work through some Steiner teachers. That one particular who's a mentor, he's a German composer, conductor, very well known. And through that, I learned a lot of the sound therapies through the Steiner method. But then I heard of Sherry, so I had her come out, and she's a very gifted person. And I also integrated some other things. But I had a room, it was, made like a musician's room, all soundproof and everything. And I created a table, a grid, and the grid had certain geometries. We had overhead apertures with that would project geometries with different light frequencies. But everything was done on testing. And then also I had some technology where it would pick up the missing note in a person just by having them talk. And we had to have them in one side, and I couldn't even be in the same room. And anyways, it was pretty elaborate. So when it came to the final therapy, I knew a lot about them. So I did an acupuncture layout, and then the sound reverberated the tone that they needed, not just a composition or music or something, but the tone they needed reverberated through the grid by way of alligator clips through an acupuncture layout that was unique to where they had their blockages. And
Wow.
then also that was coupled with geometric projections above them, doing the light therapy combined with geometric shapes coupled with the light. And we saw a miraculous thing. So that was just off the top of my head is something I created with the help of, years of learning from other people, and then a little assistance at the end with Sherry, who came out to our clinic and actually trained my whole staff there.
We've
So
talked
sound is a
about
big thing.
building that on the farm. So
Oh yeah, I'm gonna do a whole building, and it's
yeah,
gonna all be vastest geometry, and yeah, that's another story.
just got
So
to go in
we'll
there and trip out and heal.
Yeah, there you go. So the sound is, like tuning forks. Our friends that are doing the tuning forks. Just a lot of things you can do to yourself, and it's not about the external sound. It's about having it reverberate through your body, and then that's going to be picked up, translated through. So things that are going to create more general harmonics. Maybe it won't be as specific. Some of the stuff we're talking about, but it can go a long way too. So again, to answer your question, I think maybe the age of physicians has come to a close. And so rather than wring our hands that uh, naturopathic colleges and such suck these days, maybe they're obsolete, maybe people like myself are obsolete. And it's time for each of us to, go on our own journey and embrace the fact that, just like Jesus said before any of his multitude of healings, do you believe? And it wasn't believe in him, it was just believe, on a much grander scale. And that is what's going to bring us home.
Yeah,
So, one more question or one more comment. You brought up muscle testing.
yeah.
I'm a little curmudgeon-y about muscle testing because I was one of the original folks in the beginning groups. George Goodhart was a good friend who pioneered the applied kinesiology, and then some of us splintered off with Dr. Beardall, who took it into different levels of specificity with clinical kinesiology. So it was very neurological based, and the one prerequisite is you had to know medical neurology and understand that when you test a muscle in a certain way, you're going to get a different response if you don't understand the difference between upper motor neurons, lower motor neurons, gamma 1, gamma 2, all that kind of stuff. And so your technique had to be very refined to know that you were eliciting the part of the nervous system that you wanted. And also, you had to be able to differentiate all the different 500 plus divisions of the body and isolate them and test them. We actually had them down to frequencies for each one. And Renee Espy, who is in our circle, she developed a machine that could actually dial in the frequency of the muscles. And with that, I've seen in my own practice, for instance, somebody that's not around anymore either, but I used a machine for a while, but then, didn't really need it because I knew how to do it without the machine. But you saw remarkable things. Like one thing that sticks in my mind, we had a person with MS, very advanced. I had to carry him up the stairs in my clinic because he was in a wheelchair. And he eventually improved amazingly. But he was not able to use his thigh flexors. And so I isolated, the rectus femoris and just lifted it up. And I said, hold it. And he looked at me like, I can't do that. And I let go and boom, his leg just slammed on the table, which I expected. And then I put the electrodes on his head and dialed in the frequency for rectus femoris straight head and did the same thing and gave him the same command, and his leg just held up in the air. So what we're able to do by understanding those frequencies and delivering the frequencies extraneously, it wasn't the whole cure, but it was the beginning of a whole process, is his body was able to hear that muscle. It created a connection. And to his amazement, momentarily he had control of that muscle.
Wow.
Now, I did a lot of muscle testing over the years, but I was very stringent in my approach about it. Meticulous, I'll say, for good reason. Otherwise, you get spurious results. And a lot of people use muscle testing that they learned at a weekend seminar, and it's, might as well just be swinging a pendulum or something. You're just, you know, you're conceptualizing and a lot of times confirming what you believe to be true in the first place. So, not a big fan of that, but muscle testing done correctly is an amazing, and we're going to do this in the back end of our membership. I'm going to take apart body parts and all the muscles associated with different body parts, section by section, and do videos on that and things that you can do self-help with. So, muscles are the complete dipole. You have metabolic processes that we're talking about because the muscles obviously are a metabolic affair. They need the energy, they develop energy, and there's all those events going on. And then on the other hand, you have the neurological pole that is initiating the will force of that being to ambulate that particular, part of the body. And also the neurological component is also one and the same as the salt that the alchemist talked about because it's the calcified extremities. So muscles are an amazing interface or combination of both poles, metabolic and neurological. And if you know how to use them properly, you can not only use them diagnostically, but you can use them to make immediate changes in the body. And when you couple that awareness with different components of the nervous system that just like a computer keyboard allow you to get some information and then advance the information and ask the next question, the next question, the next question until you get to an end treatment point. It's which we call opening up a file. It's stupendous. That's something, that's really, I don't know if it's available anymore. George went, Alan's gone, and the wave of students, all of us together, that are, all my age and older. I don't know if anybody's practicing anymore, but it's something like I'd like to get certain components. There's people doing dribs and drabs of muscle testing out there, but not the whole thing. For instance, if you look at Leonardo da Vinci's Canon of Man, that drawing, with the man with the outstretched, arms and legs, and you have different degrees of rotation. What we found while working with EEGs and just clinical experimentation is that each of those positions created a different frequency within the central nervous system. And by muscle testing, combined with putting bodies in different positions, then we could access different areas of neurology and also get clued into what path to go down to in as far as the next level of testing till we got to an end treatment point. So a treatment would consist of maybe anywhere a dozen, 20 different end treatment points that would require any number of buttons you needed to push, from osteopathic, emotional clearing, herbal intervention, homeopathy. You just had to have a full tool belt in order to satisfy the biocomputer, in order to clear it, have a reset, and then go on to the next thing. And so when we treat somebody, maybe they came in with a certain malady, over time we had an exact roadmap of how they got there in the first place. But more importantly, we resetted every step of the way until they were done.
We're talking about kinesiology here. And we did a great Alfacast, Are We a Biocomputer one a few years back. We went pretty deep into it if you guys want to check that out. And that I look forward to Barre, you taking this to the back end on our platform and going deeper into this. That platform, guys, being our alphavedic.com/join-us. It's our private social platform, community platform on our website. Wow. This has been a great one. We do have questions, Barre. Should we? And
let's go for it. I
Okay.
think I'm rambled out.
Yeah, and you did bring up MS. There was a brief question about MS and dealing
Mhm.
with that. And well, okay, we'll go here with here's a good one for this was really early in the chat in the show, and I believe the individual's name was Dog on the chat, but brought this up. So sort of a differentiation between chronic and then sort of emergency or something that becomes extreme out of the gates or out of nowhere. And so what they were mentioning, and wasn't a very I wish I would have gotten it down better because I'm just jotting notes as the chat goes by and while managing the stream and talking to you. So it's a lot. But he basically had gone to the hospital because of septic arthritis of a hip joint. Now, I don't know if this was due to a hip joint replacement or not, but they were claiming that it was an extreme infection. And how does one manage this when we are trying to, one, be more terrain minded, stay away from antibiotics, etc., but are dealing with something that's gone septic like a hip joint?
So, entirely manageable and more efficacious without antibiotics, but it's not something the average person might be equipped to do at home. Here's what I did in those situations, because I would get a lot of those situations over the years. Um, that's where ozone comes in. I would do ozone injections right into the area,
Yes.
perhaps even do more of a systemic ozonization, which we call major autologous blood therapy, just to make sure that the sepsis, wasn't going to intensify or spread. But then at the same time, understanding that the sepsis was not created by microbes in the first place. It was created by a bioterrain imbalance that required these microorganisms to migrate there. And when you're talking about sepsis, you're talking about typically a bacterial mutation of these organisms that live within us that go into the area to clean up. Now, if your terrain is not in balance, those guys will become chronic, and they'll be gobbling up old stuff and doing things that they're supposed to do in there, in order to cure. But at the same time, they're dying off. They're creating more waste products, a higher amount of proliferation of these. Let's just say Staphylococcus for the heck of it. Say blame those guys. More will migrate into that mutated form, and then you have what you consider a chronic Staphylococcus infection. But in fact, it's all happening internally. What they're trying to do is gobble things up, but when it gets to be a very acidic, anaerobic region that is now, it would be encapsulated, pressure builds. You can actually have tissues degenerating that you don't want to have happen. And then it can also kind of spread beyond the region and, become life threatening.
Yeah.
Antibiotics work in that they kill everybody. And that's why we're all big believers in them. But there's a toll it takes on the other end, in that it kills off a lot of the things that you need in your body. And then in the long run, that comes back to haunt you. Antibiotics are probably one of the single biggest contributors to tumors, because when the biological expression happens that we call a tumor, in the second phase of healing, when the body is designed to make those go away, it requires, as we've already mentioned, the recyclers. In other words, those mutations of certain organisms that gobble up the tissue when the tissue has done its job and, whatever it was assigned to do in the first place. But now, if those populations have dwindled or been obliterated and you have some kind of expression, a growth, those guys aren't around to gobble things up, to be scavengers like they're supposed to be, and things grow unabated. That's just one consequence.
Hence
You
the
know,
one of the factors of the big C epidemic.
yeah, and we call it the cancer terrain
Yeah,
because it's a terrain condition, not a disease called that. We don't want to call it
yeah,
that anyway because they've got that copyrighted and then they, put you in prison for copyright infringement.
yeah. Oh man.
So yeah, so first off, you do the ozone treatments. That's what we would do. A lot of other things too, just to really, a lot of hands-on things to promote circulation and inside and outside. Well, isopathic therapy for sure. That's where, isopathics are the seed forms of these organisms that live inside of us and mutate in, that we're talking about in the body to do jobs. In those
Well,
acute situations, I would do injections because that would be a very, you know, dramatic and immediate effect. But then you don't try that at home because you could get in trouble if you don't know how these things work.
yeah, the isopathic is this sort of inverse of the antibiotic. It's right. It's basically assisting the terrain biome with seed forms to help those specific microbes do their job faster. Is that kind
Yeah,
of?
well, let's just say you have that so-called infection and you have maybe staphylococcus, it's in that phase, 16 phases of development that these microbes go through. That's what I used to look at under the microscope all the time. And the bacterial phase, one of them is, could be identified on a culture as staphylococcus. Well, that's its origins is from the seed form of something called penicillin notatum. So in that case, the go-to remedy would be penicillin notatum, which is, isopathic remedies that have the seed forms. And those seed forms would download in the blood, especially if you inject it, it would be more immediate. And they would go to the scene of the crime and actually degrade the larger valence forms, the bacterial, advanced forms, and actually reduce them down to their normal form, but at the same time, repopulate the colonizations in the body for when you did need that organism. So they were, plentiful, lying in wait for when you needed them. So,
Fascinating.
yeah, so it bolstered your immunity at the same time, but then also directly uh, quelled the so-called infection. And
Well,
then
I'm
if you're doing the other things to arrest the anaerobic metabolism and things that create all the, the high pressure, the pain, the degeneration that goes with an infection, then that goes away at the same time. So long-winded answer, but that's a solution. At home, if you've got an immediate situation and you don't have a practitioner that knows these kinds of things, then sometimes antibiotics can be life-saving. I hate to
yeah.
say it, but um, then on the back end, you just want to do other things to mitigate the consequences of the antibiotics.
Yeah, we're talking about acute emergency care, right?
Yeah,
The goal with that, and we've talked about this in the past, is being a in paramedic yourself, firefighter is like in the end you got to save the life. You want to make sure you live,
yeah,
and then then you deal from it there. So if you're dealing with extreme acute attack or trauma, of course, yeah. Like there's been times where I just can't take the migraine anymore, and I take some ibuprofen and then I go do a coffee enema to clean out the liver. Um, yeah, and I'm going to be taking some Symbio Forte down to Mexico with me.
great
Um,
idea.
yeah, and just in case, my terrain is not used to it down there. I'm also going to be jacking up on my tissue salts. I'm going to be what is it? The sodium nat sulf and ferrum phosphate. And just because I'm going from an extremely cold environment and relatively dry in the sense that it's been like dry and cold, I've been in snow and stuff, and I'm going to a very moist and warm environment. And so I'm going to have water issues in my body. So I'm going to be uptaking those tissue salts.
Yeah, it'll help your body not get in a situation of too much moisture uh, in the blood system,
Yeah.
in which case the body's going to have to fever and shake it out and everything, wring out the extra moisture and elevate the pulse, and those cell salts you mentioned help you do that. And then, of course, classically, when people would go into tropical zones and have that kind of situation, if they left that area, they got better.
Yeah.
And then when they go back, they get it. And that's what we would call the malarial zone, which, anyway, that's another.
Blame it on him is blame it on a poor bug. Oh,
Well,
well,
I think we could probably blame some stuff on Bill Gates mosquitoes.
yeah, indeed, indeed. He's the true bug, that's for sure. I think he is part insect. So this is a good segue into this other question by Daryl Nugent. How does marine plasma compare to this tissue salts or cell salts? And do you need to do both, or would just the plasma alone do?
The plasma is wonderful in that, and that's what I would use as far as an IV medium. I had big, solutions, big bottles, and when we did the ozone therapy, I used that instead of the pharmaceutical form of it. But then, just oral administration of those on a daily basis, great. You get all your minerals. They're very bioavailable. It's full spectrum. You pretty much, and it mimics your blood plasma exactly. So it's a wonderful way to go. The difference is the cell salts. There's 12 combinations that have been identified that directly interface with the cells of the body and tell them what to do. And it coincides with, there's 12 for a reason. We've done, whole presentations on that. But they're titrated homeopathically. They aren't classic homeopathics because they still have elements in them, but they've, been brought down to a 6x dilution or a 30 dilution. So they're much more specific to cellular functions, so they can be used prophylactically as well as for acute, conditions, and they're going to be absorbed by the cells even better with more specific results. So it's kind of apples and oranges. They're both unbelievable. The marine salts on a daily basis. Yeah, I do stuff like that daily.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about foundational
Mhm.
um, nutrition here, micronutrition and supplement. I hate to use the word supplementation, but in this world, we've talked about this before, like where you're just not getting the true natural salts and minerals that we used to get. Um, and you have a lot of funny stuff happening up in the skies, as we talked about recently, and just affecting the overall natural biosphere. It's important to take these things. So for me, like that's just one of the core constituents I get in my body every day, or my tissues. Specifically my I do the 12 in one, and then my bridge salts and my constitutional salt. And then, like I was saying, strategizing around when I'm going to be traveling or in need of certain things, I'll take the other salts depending on what I feel that I need. Okay, so here's another one for you. It's kind of a big topic these days. Marie Martinez, what's Dr. Lando's opinion on HRT, hormone replacement therapy? I guess she was on it and had some uterine lining thickness, and now the physician's recommending a hysterectomy. How do we remediate that? Is there any point to that? I'm hearing about a lot of women getting put on this. And of course, there's bigger agendas at play, but hormones, big topic.
Yeah, it's a shortcut for people that don't know how to rebuild the terrain. And I had a lot of women on hormone replacement therapy that would come to me, and all of them same story. Hey, I felt great when I was first put. I mean, if you gave me some testosterone for a while, I'd feel like $1 million, And I mean, all of a sudden your T levels are, like they were 30 years ago or something. Yeah, you can feel great, but what comes up must come down, and you can't trick the body. So what you want to do is stimulate your body to make them. When you do hormone replacement, you're making the organs that are already deficient, which is the reason why you're taking them in the first place, uh, even more lazy, we'll say, you know.
Mhm.
So I've ended up weaning women off of hormones quite often, and their problems would go away. But then on the other end, we'd also rebuild their body. So they actually started making some estrogen, progesterone, a little bit more natural. And we had ways to stimulate that. One of the things I did when I put them on a different kind of program after, just basic foundational work is giving them specifics that they needed to stimulate, both parts of the cycle, estrogen, progesterone, and doing it with different mediums, but coinciding with the lunar calendar.
Mhm.
So I'd send them home with a schedule that, you take certain things at certain phases of the moon. So it not only stimulated their their own organs to start doing some work, but to do it at the right phase of the moon cycle. Just like, in the laboratory when I'm doing plant medicine, there's certain times you prepare certain herbs, depending what's happening up in the sky clock there, and other
Yep.
times, you just wait. So you do medicine the same exact way. And here's the other thing. Doctors and a lot of naturopaths are into hormone replacement therapy too. They say they're bioidentical. That's impossible. Now, on a molecular level, maybe you could argue that it's the same thing your body makes. But when your body makes it, it's a two-part process. Number one, your body makes it down to the molecule as far as the exact amount you need. It's a constant feedback system, moment by moment. So when you get a flux of it in from your medication, it's not the way the body works, and it's a little hard on it.
Mhm.
The other thing is when your own body makes it, it then sends it to the liver. The liver puts a stamp on it. It's like the key for your body. It's your signature. Unless your body makes it, your body does not recognize it as yours.
Yep.
And there's certain things that happen with that. So bioidentical is kind of a myth.
Yeah,
Better
that
than
makes a
some
lot
of
of
the old
sense.
pharmaceutical stuff that was more harsh, definitely. Not a fan of it, just because I've had to help a lot of people wean off. And now weaning off is another thing. You don't just stop taking it, especially like thyroid and things. You don't want to just pull the rug out from somebody. It could be dangerous. But what you do is do the foundational work, get people stronger, and then when they're a little bit more on their own 2 feet, then you just start over like a 3 to 6 month period, just taking little bits off, every month. Now you're taking a half dose, now you're taking a quarter dose, and so forth. And then when it came to where there was no physical pill left, to score for them to take daily, I would make a homeopathic remedy out of it. And they take the homeopathic of it probably for another month or two, just so they had that kind of energetic imprint without the actual physical substance. So that's the way you do it, so people don't have any weaning off problems.
Mm. And then we also have the calcium supplementation, right? That relates with it.
Calcium, here's the kind of tricky thing about calcium. Calcium, you don't take calcium to get calcium. Your body makes calcium. Internally, your body takes other things such as silica and transmutes it into calcium.
Mhm.
And that might sound odd, but it's the body transmutes substances one from the other all the time. Silica is, going to translate more into calcium. Calcium is a very important medium, though. Obviously, it's one of the biggest, elements that the body needs. So it needs to make it internally. Also, it needs to get it through plant substances, because plants take up the elements and then they chelate it, they conjugate it with an amino acid. So now your body can actually absorb that. When you take calcium supplements, they will accumulate very often where you don't want them and create issues, accretions and things. And really very often not, solve your calcium problem in the first place. Here's what calcium's good for. If you know your pH zone, you can take either an anionic, an alkaline, a cationic, which is acidic, or a neutral calcium. And there's ways to formulate those. And that is going to be the strongest way to nudge your pH into a zone more favorable for you. Now, when that calcium is used properly and you're taking the right pH appropriate, it's not going to accumulate where you don't want it. It's going to nudge your pH. And when your pH is more favorable, now you're going to absorb calcium and all the other minerals from your food that much better. And as you know, it's going to be reintroduced pretty soon, 3 calcium substitutes. And it's going to be confusing because everyone's going to think I'm getting calcium from it, but it's got all sorts of goodies. I won't do the whole infomercial, but it requires a little bit of do it yourself at home by figuring out we teach exactly how to do it. Figuring out your pH zone so you know which one to take, and then you keep monitoring yourself, and it really improves not just your calcium absorption, but your mineral absorption all the way around over time. And that's what I did in clinics. So I made one product line where people can do it at home. And that's part of Kerry Ream's ionization analysis, by the way. It's not my own
I was
brilliant
just going
idea.
to say this relates to electrical resistance, which
Yeah.
then directly relates to hormones as well.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. We're coming up to the end here, but there are a couple more questions I think that are apropos. And I think one of them I want to jump right into because this is a big one that I think a lot of people get confused on, and we could probably end on this. The idea of heavy metal detox cleanses. And Keto Wellbeing was asking what your perspective is on zeolite metal detox once or twice a year. And then somebody else was asking, do we even need to do heavy metal detox? Is it just more about balancing the terrain? This is a big topic, and we've talked about chelation. There's certain individuals out there pushing specific therapies that we wouldn't recommend. But Barre, I'll just say, take it away on this one.
Yeah, back in the old days, I used to do EDTA drips and things that, worked. They're a little bit harsher and everything, but then I found more gentle ways and realized there's kind of downsides to things. That's why you call the practice. And zeolite, I think, is the best possible way to chelate. It's the most gentle and the most effective. And to answer your question, bioterrain or zeolite, I think it's both. Because if your bioterrain isn't in order, maybe you have burden elimination organs and they can't get rid of stuff in the first place. You don't want just things changing addresses in your body. You want to make sure they exit your body. That's why other things you can do at home, like coffee enemas, and like we have a cleansing formula that has zeolite, but it has other things in it too. It has the Essiac herbs, in a very concentrated form so that, it cleans your bloodstream. We've got proteolytic enzymes. And so it's like an all-in-one. It's helping your terrain clean out while you're introducing the zeolite. Now, there's different types of zeolite, and this is coming up all the time. People say, well, what kind of zeolite? What's the micron size and all that? And there's many grades out there, and most is sourced, domestically. And, a lot of it's pretty good. It's micronized and, purified and everything. I've gone, I believe, a step further. I get mine from Slovenia, and they have a process in this manufacturing where, first off, they source the zeolite from a very pure region from volcanic ash. And then they micronize it. Now, micronizing, a lot of places that are micronized, they use metallic pulverization. And there's a question, are there metals introduced in the process? um, possibility. What these people do is they've got ceramic compression so that there's no possibility of metallic contamination of the zeolite. Furthermore, it's 3 times pulverized, so you have micron size ranges that are smaller than any other product on the planet, guaranteed. And in some of our new pages, you'll see it even tells you the micron size. Then the third thing they do is they activate it. Activating means that they process it in certain temperature ranges that get rid of all the moisture. Now, you can take a quartz crystal, you think there's no moisture in it. There's actually moisture in there. So this process gets rid of all the internal moisture, and the end product then allows that zeolite that's highly refined in the best of ways, smallest micron size for better absorption, and activated so it actually absorbs more goodies than non-activated. So it's a very expensive zeolite. Believe me, making this stuff, I'd rather just go get the regular stuff. It'd be a fraction of the price, but I just use what I want to put in my own body, and I take it every day. So that's what
Yeah,
we use for our zeolite.
that's we want to stress that, guys. Everything in our store we use, so you're getting the very best. So we have our lumen greens that has the zeolite in it, and that's a fantastic all-in-one cleansing powder that I typically take in my smoothies when I do a smoothie. And
Yeah, it's a good one.
yeah, it's a great one. And then we of course have the 0 Point Gold cleanse as
Yeah.
well, which is a fantastic
And then
liquid.
people have asked us, they say, well, is this enough milligrams in your cleanse? The drops. Well, first off, it's in a complex of sonicated herbal extracts that are the classic ESIAC formulas I already mentioned. So it's purifying in and of itself.
Yeah.
And you got the proteolytic enzymes to clear accretions in the bloodstream, which are prevalent in these days, even in people that didn't get the roll up your sleever. We're wondering why that is shedding an actual phenomenon? I'm not sure, but we're seeing some suspicious rumors or evidence of that.
I think
And
it could
also
be
with
the
what's dropping out of the sky. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. That was the next point I was going to make. So anyway, it's not about amounts of zeolite. It's about putting it in a medium where it's going to be complete, and it's going to work better with all these other components that are working together. And the same thing with the powdered version and the greens, because the greens are chelating agents in and of themselves, but there's still a healthy amount of zeolite in there. We're just not more is better of one ingredient. It's like, how do you put it together? And then, of course, in the herbal things, we don't just do normal tincturing. We start from scratch with mushrooms and herbs and all those sorts of things, and then get the most out of them through a fermentation followed by a sonication. And yeah, so much superior to just sticking something and waiting for it to be extracted.
Yeah, that's the thing I learned from you very early on when we started Alpha Vedic, is understanding the carrier medium, the actual process of delivering whatever nutrition or therapeutic or whatever through these, if you want to call it a cellular matrix, or through the tissues, right?
Yeah.
It's an extremely important technology, and I think a lot of people are still kind of super in the dark about that.
Yeah, well, it's a learning curve, and I don't blame anyone. They're just, getting inundated with information from everybody. We're all trying to sell stuff, and ours is the best. No, theirs is, everybody's selling their own thing, and it just depends what you're exposed to. And but do it yourself. Healthcare, it's about the journey and seeing what works for you,
Yeah.
and that's what this talk has been all about. And I think if anybody gets anything from this talk today, it's just that, well, okay, we're going to elaborate more on a lot of these things rather than just throwing a lot of information out there. and develop each of these topics better. But number one, your body is remodeled in the physical moment by moment and the astral plane. And that's just the
Yes.
way it is.
Yeah. Beautiful. So in depth today, Bear, and just as you were saying, scratching the surface, it's just really opening up many doorways and or pathways towards lots of other conversations. We can go through that presentation, slide by slide, because it's just so in depth and rich. And what I like too is it leads into a lot of really fun philosophical and spiritual ponderings about the nature of reality. That's what's so cool about when you dive into knowing yourself and your body, it opens up the true spiritual path, you know. Um, and that was my initiation, was through health issues, right? And so for anyone listening who is currently going through it, whether it be acute health issue or something that's chronic, or even just the dark night of the soul, hopefully you found a little inspiration, a little motivation, or just some kind words here to lead you towards maybe a new path of understanding. And then, of course, you can join us in the private platform community group there on Alpha Vedic. And what's nice, it's in the private. You can message people. You can create your own group, even if you have a specific interest that would be amenable to the community. Uh, we allow that, and then we can further have these discussions in the private. And it's really nice to do that. So, any parting words for our audience before we wrap it up?
No, just thanks for joining in, everybody. And, we'll do more of these. Mike and I were talking yesterday, maybe once a month, we'll do in-house ones and then also work on our stable of stellar guests at the same time.
Yeah, we're taking next week off because I'll be in Mexico and we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of new fun stuff, guys, launching on the website. So Bear's been really busy in the lab and the whole team with getting this done, labels, and we do everything from an off-grid farm. So it's a process of love. But yeah, we've got the new pet products coming out. That's really exciting. I know my pooches will be loving those.
Yeah, it's
And
bottled and ready to go. And oh, by the way, a lot of my product development is I know what I want to do. I know how to do it so it works. But then part of the development is putting things out there and seeing how it works for people, not whether it works physiologically, but if it works within their lifestyle and everything. So um, I introduced a lot of things back in uh, fall time, and now we're reintroducing the refined versions and the pet products. For instance, I was trying to do an all-in-one, and it was a little too intense for some pups. Just trying to cram everything all in one, because I really believe in a good C60 product for pets. And so I had it combined with the all-in-one nutritional formula. So now those are two products. And one that we bottled up yesterday is full nutrition with fulvic. And, it's all liposome too, so it's liposomally delivered, which magnifies the potency and
amazing.
absorbability. And with all the other stuff we're talking about too. And so it's got everything you need. But also I added zeolite in there because pets they have quick metabolisms, they're smaller size, and it's really going to affect their longevity. So I added zeolite in there in the full spectrum for the pets. And then the second product that you'll see probably at the end of the week here is a C60. It's MCT oil combined, black seed oil, C60 suspension, ultrasonicated. But I also added turmeric curcumin extract, which is going to be great for their joints and really amplify the benefits that you get from the C60. Old dogs take the
Yeah.
C60 and all of a sudden they're running and jumping
Yeah.
again.
Right.
And the
So your
curcumin,
dog went back into heat.
yeah, and the curcumin extract is going to really help with the C60. So that's it. It's
Awesome.
probably the most infomercials we've ever done since we've ever done this, period.
Well, I'm excited for our furry friends, and it's important to take care of them because they take care of us. I will say, and I saw your door opening multiple times. It wasn't a ghost, guys, behind Bear. That was his little pooch coming in and out. But but
He knows how to
they
open the door.
they are the greatest reminder of not of just pure love. What's the word I'm looking for, Bear? Thank you, unconditional love.
Living in the moment.
Living in the moment and unconditional love. Like
Yeah.
if I call Callie over right now, if I open my door, she'll come and put her head on my lap, and it will keep her head on my lap until I say enough's enough. Like until she would die of starvation. Like
Yeah.
it's
I go outside for 5 minutes, come back in. It's like she hasn't seen me for 10 years, you know.
oh, I know. When I get back from Mexico, they're gonna go bananas. So luckily, we have Shannon here, who, as you know, she works at Alpha. She is one of the most tender-hearted animal lovers I've ever met. So we're blessed to have her here taking care of our chickens while we're gone, and our bees are kicking it. Our bees are making it through. I built a little shelter for over the
Nice.
hives, and they've made it through the winter so far. We've lost them the last few years because of
Yeah.
the moisture. So,
Yeah.
anyways, guys. I look forward to we have a lot of the luminaries coming on in 2 weeks. We talked a bit about the lunar cycles and related to cell salts on this show. Like we're going to go deep into that. We're going to go deep into her cosmology, her calendrical system, and then tap into Walter Russell style kind of physics and toroidal mechanics and how that relates to the realm. And it's going to be a great chat. So we'll see you in 2 Thursdays. I'll be sending some videos from Mexico. I'll be hanging out with Falconer and Tom Barnett and Marjorie Wildcraft and all sorts of characters. So love you guys. Remember to get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something, go show Mother Nature your love. She'll show it right back. And we'll see you next go around. Love you guys. Peace. And if you want to see this presentation, I'll get it up on the website. You can track us on Telegram or on the website to find that link. And you know what? I'll put it in the show notes too, Bear. I'll put
Okay.
the presentation in the show notes below for those listening or watching the replay. Love you guys. Peace.